Good evening. Rebecca, can you give the invocation this evening?
Good evening. Rebecca from Ignite Church Freeport. So as I was praying for you guys today, I was really thinking about the word capacity. And that really I'm thinking is speaking of expanding your capacity, especially for like the new members of the council that are just coming in, and I know that it's stretching, learning all new things. And so I just really want to bless and just bless you with expanding your capacity, especially as you go into strategy for this city, that you would see that bigger view and that you would have the strategies that are coming forward. So I just want to release that to you. Jesus, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for this time. We thank you for this amazing council. And God, I thank you that you are expanding their territory. In 1 Chronicles 4:10, that you would bless them, that you would expand their borders, that your mighty hand will be with them at all times, and that you always keep them from harm. And so, God, I just thank you that you release a mighty strategy. And even with the strategic planning, even with the meetings, that you would expand their capacity and their efficiency so that even the meetings would be shorter but more productive. So I bless them in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. So now we will officially call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller.
Here.
Alderpersons Borneman.
Present.
McClanathan.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Busker.
Here.
Brashaw is absent. Mysick.
Here.
And Berberet.
Here.
And then Alderman Borneman has asked if Tommy Tite could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could all stand with us and for the pledge. Thank you, Tommy. Item number 1 is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Either one of us. Yeah. Mysick.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Alderman Ross, seconded by Alderman Mysick for the approval of the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Item number 2 is the approval of the minutes from the council meeting from September 3rd, 2019. Is there a motion for this approval?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Busker, seconded by Alderman Berberet for the approval of the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Public comments, I believe we have none. Item number 4 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is considered to be routine in nature and acted as one motion unless there's a member of the council that would like to have something removed for further discussion. Is there anything to be removed, council? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of approval and placing on file the police pension fund from minutes from January to April 2019, the fire's pension fund minutes from January to April 2019, library minutes from March to July 2019, building permit report for August 2019, the fire department report August 2019, the financial report for general, library, water, sanitary, sewer, store and sewer funds for August 31st, 2019, and the cash investment report for August 31st, 2019. Also is the approval of the finance bills payable in the total of $564,404.32, as well as the approval for the payroll for pay period ending August 31st, 2019, in the total of $564,106.48. Is there a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Parker, seconded by Alderman Ross. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Borneman.
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Mysick.
Aye.
And Berberet.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, Council, I just would like to read a following proclamation for Fire Prevention Week. Whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are locations where people are at the greatest risk for fire. And whereas October is National Fire Prevention Month and October 3rd through the 9th is Fire Prevention Week. And whereas this year's theme is Not Every Hero Wears a Cape, Plan and Practice Your Escape, which recognizes the everyday people who motivate their households to develop and practice a home fire escape plan. Those seemingly basic behaviors can be the life-saving impact. And whereas the City of Freeport is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Freeport. And whereas home fire escape plans should be developed by all members of the household and practice in home fire escape plans twice a year, ensuring that everyone in the household knows what to do in a real fire situation. And whereas the City of Freeport's first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries, prevention and protection education. Now therefore, I, Jody Miller, Mayor of the City of Freeport, declare October 3rd through the 9th Fire Prevention Week in the City of Freeport, and I encourage all the people of Freeport to take fire safety seriously to protect yourselves and those you care for. So there you go, Chief. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this proclamation. This is a very important piece to kicking off Fire Prevention Week because it renews our commitment every year to fire prevention and all of the activities that the fire department undertakes to prevent fire and injury in our community. Since 1922, the NFPA has sponsored the public observation of National Fire Prevention Week. In 1925, President Calvin Coolidge proclaimed National Fire Prevention Week as observance, making it the longest-running public health observance in our country. During Fire Prevention Week, children, adults, teachers learn how to stay safe in case of fire. Firefighters provide life-saving public education in an effort to drastically decrease casualties caused by fires. Fire Prevention Week is observed each year during October 9th, the week of October 9th, in commemoration of the Great Chicago Fire, which began October 8th, 1871. Caused devastating damage, horrific conflagration, killing more than 250 people and left 100,000 homeless, destroyed more than 17,400 structures, and burned more than 2,000 acres of land. This year's theme, as the mayor mentioned, is Not Every Hero Wears a Cape, Plan and Practice Your Escape. We want you to, 1, practice your escape route, or plan your escape route, 2, test your smoke alarms, 3, choose an outside meeting place. Make sure everyone in the home knows where that is, and make a regular reminder so that anyone who is visiting or maybe at your home knows where that meeting place is. And then practice your drills on a regular basis. If you do those things, you make your home fire safe and your family fire safe, and definitely help us out in the event a fire does occur in your home. Thank you very much again for this proclamation.
Thank you, Chief. We will move on to item number 6, which is the presentation of the Government Accounting Standards Board. That would be Bob from Lauterbach and Amon.
What you have in front of you, I'm Bob Reeds, Lauterbach and Amon. We do 5 reports for the city each year. The 2 pension, police and fire funding reports, the 2 pension GASB reports, and also the city OPEB or post-retirement medical GASB 75 report. So I've given you all those individual reports. I think it would take too much time to go through every one of those in a lot of detail, so we did prepare a summary. If you want to, let's see, I can pull this up here as well. Yes.
No, just step closer to the mic, please,
Okay.
so I can do it.
That will be better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, starting at the first page, this is primarily dealing with the funding of the two funds. The first page looks at the contribution requirements and their funded percentages and kind of gives you a comparison from the prior year to this year. If you recall, last year was the first year Lauterbach and Amon became the actuary for the city. So the numbers went up substantially from your prior actuary last year. We had assumption changes and those sorts of things. We see a lot less of that going forward, and we're a little bit along the same sort of path. But there are some still significant changes that happened during the year. If you look at the fire pension fund, the prior year contribution is just under 1.9 million, up to 2.11 million this year. Similarly on police, 2.2 last year, up to 2.35 million. So we're still seeing gradual increases. A lot of that we can get into some of the detail where those are coming from in the next pages. You'll see your funded percentages, 62% for fire, 48% for police. And again, that's on an actuarial value of assets basis. Recall the actuarial value basis is a little bit different than a market value basis, which means any year you have investment gains and losses, we don't recognize those immediately, but we spread those over a 5-year period. So typically your actuarial value will be higher than your market value in the case that you're deferring losses each year. Your member counts, 43 active firefighters, 47 active police officers, and then your inactive member count, 68 retired fire and 59 retired police officers. The next page goes through the change in net position. What the net position is your market value of assets. We'll look at the total column here. You'll see 58.1 million to begin the year. The city put in 2.4 million, 964,000 for fire, 1.4 million for police. Employee contributions, so these are the direct payroll deductions by firefighters and police officers, totaling 595,000. Earned over just $3 million in investments, and you're paying out $5.6 million each year in benefit payments. Other expenses of $84,000, such as just the administration of the fund, accounting, actuarial, all those sorts of fees that come along with it. And then there was an audit adjustment during the year that we saw come through for each fund to get your net ending position of $58.3 million combined. Big number that we saw on the prior page we want to take a little bit closer look at is those benefit payments. Okay, when you look at fire pension, police pension, 2.5 million for police, 3 million for fire. What it's expected to do in the next couple years, 5 years and 10 years, it's going to increase to 3.8 million and then increase to 4.25 million for fire. Similarly, for police, you're expecting increases as well. Now, if we took a look at the current benefit payments as a ratio of your market value of assets, it's a pretty good indicator where some of the money of your fund is going. Is 8.77% benefit payments are going out each year. So what that means is we have a 6.75% investment return. So ideally, in a perfect world, you'd like to have that ratio under 6.75%, where you can make the assumption that investment returns are going to pay our benefit payments. And then in that case, all the money that the city puts in, all the money that the officers and firefighters are putting in are going to where it's needing to go to protect the future benefits and pay down your current unfunded liability. When you do start seeing that ratio rise above your invested return, that means sometimes the money that you're putting in contributions is going right back out the door in benefit payments. So you're not able to realize a lot of those investment returns, and also it's making some cash flow risk on the fund itself, just because the money is staying a little bit more liquid investments, and you're going to have a little bit of bigger strain to make those benefit payments going forward. So those are definitely some numbers we want to keep an eye on. Seeing police up at around 11%, the large difference between why police is 11% and fire's at 8.7% is because those funded ratios. Recall on the prior page, the fire pension was about 65% funded, so there's more assets available to pay, with police being a little less funded that ratio is a little bit higher, so it's a little bit more financial strain for the police fund to keep the cash flow going straight. Any questions on that? Okay, changes in contributions. This is just a quick slide of what happened throughout the year to make those, the change in increase in contributions, as I indicated on the first page, went from about 1.9 million to 2.1 for police and similar increase for fire. Expected changes, each year we expect the cost to go up. The reason why is the way we amortize the unfunded liability is on an increasing payment schedule, so you amortize on an increasing scale. A little bit different than the way you would amortize a typical mortgage as a flat dollar, same amount every year until you're paid off. This is an increasing pattern, so each year we would expect an increase to come into that contribution amount. Other demographic items that came about, salary increases greater than unexpected, small increase for fire, small decrease for police. Demographic changes, we have a couple slides in here to go through some demographic changes that came about. Assumption changes, we didn't change anything significant this year, with the exception with the DOI filing this year. They actually asked us to, or as part of the DOI filing, they wanted to gain actual spousal data for all your retired members. So we got that information and we included it. So typically we include an assumption that female retirees, or females are typically 3 years younger than a male, okay? The assumption changes for fire shows an increase there, which means that's not quite the case. Females are a little bit closer in age than 3 years, and for police, females are a little bit wider than 5 years in general. Okay? No funding policy changes this year. The expected rate of return on assets, a little bit less than expected. We were expecting that 6.75%. Came in a little bit less than that this year, so that, again, causes an increased cost going forward. Contributions came in a little bit less than what was expected. Again, those recommended amounts that I showed on page 1 versus the actuals that came in on page 3 show that what those differences were in the actual contributions that came in. Again, will increase your costs going forward. And then at the bottom line, again, showing the net increase in the contribution of $350,000 in total. All right. Demographic changes, this is just some of the detail behind where those costs came in the demographic side. I don't need to go through each one of these in bullets in detail. You will just see that there's hires, there's retires, there's a couple deaths, there's a little bit of everything that happens in these funds. So these are where all the individual amounts where they come from and how we get to those results and changes in costs. So again, for fire and for police, we see a little bit of demographic information. And then this is the similar page on the funded percentage, where you started at the year at 65.7% for fire, 50.2% for police, and all those same changes that we just talked about, increase in cost, how those affected your funded percentage for the year. So you do see a decreasing funded percentage down to 62% and 48% for each fund respectively. And then the last page here is the GASB information. So the GASB is the city's financial statement recording number. So this is what's going to go into your city financial statements. And you'll see the bottom line, the net pension or OPEB liability, $28.4 million for police, or fire, excuse me, $38.8 million for police, and about $8 million for the OPEB post-retirement medical. So above there we talk about the expected rate of return. Although we expect 6.75% to come into these funds for the police and fire, the plan is not projecting to be solvent. So the plan is projecting to run out of money at this time. So that being said, the way that the GASB structure works is we have to do an 80-year projection of benefit payments. And what we do is we discount those benefit payments with your expected rate of return on assets to the extent that the plan has money to pay them. So we can discount them for 6.75% all the way up to the point the plan becomes insolvent. At that point in time, we have to revert to a municipal bond index of about 3.79% and discount the remaining payments, come up with a blended rate. So you'll see about 100 basis point difference, 50 basis point difference for police, 100 basis for fire. And what that does is directly increases your liability. So if you looked at the unfunded liability that we show on page 1 for the police and fire funds, these two net pension liabilities are going to be greater for both of those amounts because of that discount rate, because the plan is projecting to have some solvency issues going forward.
Questions, comments, council?
Mayor,
Alderman McClanahan.
thank you.
I guess, first thing to put out is, these were figures that you used going, ended at like May 1 of this year, is that correct?
Correct, 4/30/19 fiscal year end.
Okay, so we passed, after that, we passed some changes that are going to lead to additional dedicated funding sources on that. We should start to see that being taken into consideration at next year's presentation?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, and in addition, if there's a what we call a formal funding policy, an agreement between the city and the pension boards to say we're going to fund at this level, we can take that into account when they do those GASB projections. So if you do have something in place now and it's a formal agreement between the two, we can take that into account and hopefully, raise that discount rate and get it up to projecting the plan being solvent going forward, and that would reduce that hit you're taking on the bottom line balance.
Follow up, Mayor? And what I was referring to wasn't a formal agreement with the board, rather it was an ordinance with a tax rate, and in the ordinance it dedicated X amount of portion to it to
Right.
the police fund and then to the fire fund.
That would be the same. That would operate the same way.
Okay.
If you had an ordinance or an agreement with the board, either one. If it's a new item that, from an audit perspective, saying there's support to saying we're going to do this going forward, then we could use those as our basis for our projections.
Okay. Follow up, Mayor? All right. But as it stands right now, at that cutoff, before those actions were taken, but based on the figures when you cut it off, both of the police and the fire pension funds lost some ground in regards to their percentage of funding, correct?
They did, yes.
And going forward, without taking, like I said, those steps that were in there, but just based on your projections in regards to that, when you're talking about insolvency, you had a date of, I think it was 2055 for the police and 2053 for the fire.
Yeah.
And those, again, will be subject to review once we have these changes incorporated. And so we kind of need to wait and see as to how that's going to impact it. We're talking about estimated 808,000 additional funding from those two measures that we're talking about.
Okay.
Manager Crowe, are you going to?
So one of the things that Director Bucas and I have talked about is that he's going to take forth and try and get the two pension boards also to adopt a funding, an agreement, and so then we can bring that back to the council for your approval as well from them, as well as the additional funding we've already set aside.
Further comments, council?
I do have a question. Then this is probably for Manager Crowe and Director Bucas as well. Looking at the contribution levels that were recommended, looking at our past history of taking all of our property taxes and applying it towards pensions at this point, and then also taking into account employee contributions as well as the projections at this time for the taxes, how close are we to being able to be on track with the recommended contributions this year without any further changes?
If you look at all three sources of funding, the personal property replacement tax, the property tax, and then for the fire department, the electric tax, and for the police department, the gas tax, from looking at the preliminary reports, it looks like if we use all three sources of funding, and if they're projected to come in as we expect, meaning the electric and the natural gas tax, we'll be pretty close to meeting with the police department the requirements for the recommended contribution. And I didn't have the fire actuary, so I wasn't able to really look at that. But from looking at the notes just now that Bob handed out, I think we'll come pretty close to that as well. We'll probably be a couple $100,000 short on the fire.
And as we experienced last year, we got an increase in EAV. We're supposed to get the first projections on EAV sometime in the next 2 weeks, which will give us an idea as we go into our budget process how much more EAV will be for fire that we will have available for fire and police.
Mayor, with your projections, and I appreciate, we didn't have all the fire, but we had the police, and I imagine many of the assumptions that you're using in regards to rate of return, The salary increases, number of personnel, things of that nature, largely stay the same. So looking at it from our perspective, if we as a council gets pretty near or on a pattern of meeting those required contributions, and going forward out over the next few years, is the biggest risk to us, outside of market, of course, but is the biggest risk to us, if we are meeting our contribution levels, having both staffing increases that exceed your projections, as well as salary increases that exceed your projections, for as we're trying to make a determination down the road as to how do we stay on path for that 100% target funded?
The biggest risk from my perspective is what I touched upon with regard to the benefit payments, and how those are escalating. Really the big item to keep, people are living longer. Longevity is a real thing, so the longer that those benefits are being paid out, that's a bigger strain to the fund. Fire is in a better situation right now with having a higher ratio of funded percentage, but that is probably, to me, one of the bigger concerns, and looking down the road and seeing where, in 10 years, how those benefit payments are going to increase as we go. The projection we do is a closed group projection, so we don't expect 5 new actives every year, those sorts of things. So we expect the payroll to increase, but how the projections work is GASB requires us to separate the payroll between current employees and new employees. So when you look at the back of those reports, you'll see that those are on a decreasing pattern, just looking at the current population that you have in place right now.
Follow up, Mayor. So given that we have no control over the life expectancy, and as we saw a year ago, you guys made the adjustments, accurately so, but the things we can control on your closed group is whether we stick largely within that closed group number and stick largely within those salary projections. And if we don't do that, we're going to be off your charts. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Just a quick one, Mayor.
Sure, Alderman Borman.
The insolvency projection that you mentioned, is that based off of our current contributions, or is that based off of what would happen even if we met the increase in recommended contributions?
So you'll see inside those reports, there's going to be a tab on page 25-ish, somewhere around there. It gives a 5-year history of actual contributions versus current contributions for what we call the actuarially determined contribution, what the recommended contribution would have been. So, for example, say you came in at 70% of the recommended contribution is what the actual amount was. That's what we'll assume is going forward. So under this new ordinance that you've indicated, if that ratio starts going up to say you're paying now 90% of recommended contributions, that will come into those future projections, and then that will help the future funding. Obviously, anytime you can fund the plan earlier and putting more money in like that will help those projections, and with the interest accruing and the money coming in faster is going to help the long-term solvency.
Alderman Berberet.
Thank you, Mayor. Bob, thank you. This is very eye-opening information, very helpful, especially somebody who's new, and I think my fellow newbies have a little better understanding thanks to your laying this out. I want to talk a bit about expected rate of return and the discount rate. You said the discount rate was kind of an average of the market return over 5 years.
What the discount rate is for the GASB projections, we assume you're going to hit 6.75%.
Right.
But then, as it's indicated by the year 2055 or so for each fund, the plan is supposed to run out of money. Okay? So once the plan has run out of money, there are still projected benefits to be paid. So we can no longer assume we're going to get 6.75% on no remaining assets. So we have to revert down to a 3.79% bond index.
Okay.
And then we discount all those cash flows back. And then what the discount rate that we show there is basically a single equivalent rate to that whole projection stream on average over that whole lifespan.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Next, we have item number 7 for an appointment. Madam Clerk, could you please read this?
Appointment of Deputy City Clerk Rhea Cameron as a designated Freedom of Information Act and Open Meetings Act officer.
Is there a motion for such an approval?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Parker, seconded by Alderman Busker for the approval of this appointment. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Borneman,
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
And Meissick.
Aye.
And Berberet.
Aye.
The appointment is approved, 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 8 is the second reading of ordinance 2019-49. Could you please read this?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport providing for the regulation and an inspection of elevators.
Thank you. Director Zupkoff.
Your Honor, thank you. Really nothing new on this, just a refresher. This is an ordinance that adopts the state's elevator safety rules, and adopting that ordinance along with the municipal agreement council adopted with Office of the State Fire Marshal last meeting will, moving forward, allow the city to provide elevator inspections through our licensed inspection company, Elevator Inspection Services.
Mayor,
Alderman McClanathan.
this will be a repeat as well, but to summarize, it was recommended by the state office.
Yes.
It provides for localized control at a lower cost than they were being charged when the state fire marshal was doing the program, and should have a quicker response time than when the fire marshal was doing the program. All correct?
That's all correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll on the passage of ordinance 2019-49?
Borneman,
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Meissick.
Aye.
And Berberet.
Aye.
The ordinance is passed 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 9, first reading of ordinance 2019-51. Could you please read this?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport amending Part 8, Business Regulations and Taxation Code, Title 4, Taxation of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Freeport to create a new Chapter 900 to be entitled Municipal Cannabis Retailers Occupation Tax.
Thank you. Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we discussed in Committee of the Whole, this establishes our taxation at the maximum rate. This does not, for adult cannabis dispensaries, this does not say whether we're going to have the dispensaries or not. That's a further discussion to have at a later time. But this has to be passed by the end of September to make sure that we are filing it in time to receive those taxes by the Illinois Department of Revenue. And just on a side note, discussions this morning with the mayor and I and Chairman Hadley and the county administrator indicate that the county is going to pass their tax later on this week for the same. So this ensures that we receive the maximum amount of taxes. And when I have talked to, over the last week, I have talked to some of the medicinal retailers that are looking to go into the adult cannabis. They actually feel that if the municipalities don't pass this, we are missing an opportunity to gain revenue into the city. So this does not again approve anything for location of any facility. This strictly establishes a tax if we ever decide to open a facility.
Madam Mayor,
Alderman Parker.
motion to move this to the next reading.
Second it.
Madam Mayor,
Alderman Borneman.
I guess this is for Mr. Crowe. Are you seeking to suspend the rules and vote on this today?
I am, because we need to have it in the hands of the Illinois Department of Revenue by the end of the month.
We have a motion pending to move this on. Do we need to vote on that first, or can I make a motion to suspend the rules?
Right, so you need a motion to
Suspend.
suspend the rules, to waive the first reading.
So there is a motion on the floor made by Alderman Parker, seconded by Alderman Ross to move this forward. So now, if you'd like to suspend the rules, you can make that motion.
Make that motion.
Second.
Okay, so now before you, council, we have a motion for the suspension of the rules made by Alderman Borneman, seconded by Alderman Parker. Suspension of the rules is non-debatable and must pass by a 2/3 majority. Madam Clerk, would you take a roll on the suspension of the rules only?
Borneman,
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Meissick.
Aye.
And Berberet.
Aye.
The suspension of the rules passes 7-0.
Okay, so now before you, council, is the second final reading for passage of ordinance 2019-51. Is there any further discussion concerning this? Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Borneman.
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Meissick.
Aye.
And Berberet.
Aye.
The ordinance is passed 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 10 is the first reading of ordinance 2019-52. Could you please read this?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport approving stop sign at Shawnee and Arcade.
Director Carr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This intersection is the intersection that sits just west of the Shawnee Underpass, there at the railroad. I think anybody who has traveled this has had that uncomfortable feeling when you're going eastbound that there is going to be somebody coming from the underpass that may turn left right in front of you. So this ordinance that sits in front of you would place a stop sign on the eastbound Shawnee at that intersection. So eastbound Shawnee would have to stop. The underpass can come through, and then they can manage that from there. This will reduce the chance of there being a T-bone accident as well as a head-on accident at that location.
Thank you, Director Carr. I know there's been lots of concern with that intersection, so thank you for that. Council, do you have any questions?
Mayor.
Alderman Ross.
Yes, I want to thank you, Director Carr, because I had a lot of the constituents in that area spoke to me about it, about a lot of near misses, and they're going to feel very comfortable with that. There is a stop sign there to help slow down the traffic and make it flow a lot more freely and safer. Thank you. Oh, yes. Yeah, motion approved.
Second.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Alderman Meissick.
a question on this as well. So as I understand the intersection, placing a stop sign there would keep traffic from a very dangerous situation. Now, on the stop sign itself, just so it's clear, it's not a multi-way, not like a three-way intersection. Is there any plan to state to yield to oncoming traffic, or oncoming traffic is not is not stopping, right? That's basically a throughway for those making a left-hand turn who are headed westbound.
I can look to see if there's a plaque in the manual for uniform traffic control for any kind of oncoming traffic does not stop. That might be what we would be looking for. I'm not sure if I've ever seen one in person, but I can absolutely look to see if there's something like that.
Sure. Follow-up. So it is just a very confusing intersection, and so this is just for clarity and looking into that, so I appreciate that, Director Carr.
Okay, so council, before you, we have a motion made by Alderman Ross, seconded by Alderman Busker for moving ordinance 2019-52 on to the next regularly scheduled meeting. Anything further, council? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 11, which is the first reading of ordinance 2019-53. Could you please read this?
An ordinance of the City of Freeport approving lease of city parking lot to Newell.
Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been an ongoing discussion. Our contract with Newell actually expires in October as we go forward. So we've been, they approached us about the idea that we would renew that contract. They have asked to renew it at the $500 a month. We were concerned because of the cost, which we'll be approving later on with the park to resurface the parking lot. The parking lot is in need of resurfacing. We wanted to make sure that the lease agreement covered the cost of the parking lot, so we put an additional, worked very closely with their attorney and as well as Attorney Zito, and that if they decide to terminate the contract, they have a right to terminate it after 5 years, but if they terminate it before the 10-year mark, which is the payback, they'll give us $20,000 to cover the remaining cost of the parking lot. It is a 10-year lease with, like I said, a right for them to terminate it at 5 years, and then with 2 5-year renewables after that point. They will be responsible for the snow plowing and any grass cutting that is required in that parking lot. We will be responsible for any maintenance of the parking lot. stand by for any questions.
Make a motion to move this forward.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Alderman Parker, seconded by Alderman Busker. Is there any further discussion, council? So we will move ordinance 2019-53 on to the next regularly scheduled meeting. Next is item number 12, which is the first reading of ordinance 2019-54. Madam Clerk, would you please read this?
An ordinance granting a variance from requirements of Section 1250.01B20 pertaining to maximum size of ground-mounted solar arrays in a residential district for property located at 2340 Marvin Lane in Freeport.
Thank you. Director Zupkoff.
Thank you, Your Honor. Some of the background on this: Iconic Energy LLC, a solar installers, applying for a ground mount solar array that's 3,523 square feet to be constructed at this address, 2340 Marvin Lane, and that is a residential property zoned R3. The proposed size exceeds the maximum size of 625 square feet for a ground mount solar array on a residential lot, and that's a special use in all residential anyway, so you'll be considering the special use after this. We believe this request for a variance compares favorably with the city's required standards for variance, as well as the LaSalle-Sinclair factors for land use. More specifically, the proposed variance is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the City of Freeport zoning code. This ordinance requirement was written based on a typical sized residential yard that's about a quarter-acre size, and a typical house about 1,500 square feet. The lot at 2340 Marvin Lane is exceptionally large at 3.19 acres, and the house is about 5 times larger than that average size house at 8,000 square feet. So allowing a larger solar array that's about 5 times larger than the array we would usually allow does seem appropriate in this case. Strict enforcement of the city's zoning code would result in practical difficulties or impose exceptional hardships due to special and unusual conditions which are not generally found on other properties in the same zoning district. Again, this property is exceptionally large and requires that proportionately sized solar array to be effective. If held to the maximum size in the ordinance, the developer feels energy production would be insufficient for this property. The property could not yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed in the zoning code. The maximum size of 625 square feet would prohibit the development from producing the necessary energy required at this property. The plight of the ownership is due to unique circumstances. This property is among the largest residential properties in the city, and the proposed solar array is proportionate to that parcel and home size. If the variance is granted, it will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood and will not be a substantial detriment to adjacent property. Due to the low profile nature of this solar array, and that's to say at full tilt, it has a height of approximately 27 inches only, and ample vegetation on this property, the effect on neighboring property should be minimal. And the LaSalle-Sinclair factors: the existing uses of nearby properties are similar to the proposed one. Nearby properties are all also zoned R3, though none of the contiguous properties are currently developed. Property values of nearby parcels are not likely to be diminished by the proposed use, given once again the exceptionally large size of this lot and its remote location at the end of an otherwise undeveloped cul-de-sac, plus considering again the low profile nature of the proposed development and presence of dense vegetation on this property, it is unlikely the solar array would impede values on neighboring lots. A relative hardship is not likely to be imposed on adjacent or nearby property owners by reason of the proposed use. Any view of the solar array, which itself is not necessarily a nuisance to the eyes of a reasonable person, will be partially obscured from neighbors by pre-existing trees and plant life. And as for noise, a typical solar inverter hums at about the same volume as a home refrigerator, and of course only during sunlight hours. The property is well suited for the proposed use. There is ample room to fit this size solar array on this lot, as shown in the installation plot plan included in the application. The property is not vacant. There is a public need for the proposed use. Solar is generally beneficial to public users by reducing their monthly energy costs, plus solar is thought useful to society as a whole by generating clean, inexpensive, renewable energy. And finally, the City of Freeport has thoroughly planned and zoned its land use per the comprehensive plan dated April 5th of 2010. The proposed use is contemplated by such a plan. The comprehensive plan encourages the use of green technology in Freeport, including solar energy. Therefore, we would ask for your approval of this variance request.
Madam Mayor,
Alderman Busker.
motion to move it forward?
Second.
It doesn't matter. One of us.
Okay, we have a motion made by Alderman Busker, seconded by Alderman McClanathan to move ordinance 2019-54 onto the next regularly scheduled meeting, unless there's something more the council would like to discuss.
Mayor.
Alderman Burberry.
I'd like to ask a general question. Since the council approved modifying the electrical tax and the gas tax by adding something to it, can't think of the right terminology. When a commercial or residential property puts a large solar array there, it reduces their use of electricity, therefore reducing potential income to the city.
That's correct.
Is there any way to seek some type of offset?
Our ordinances currently don't set up that. We would have to go back and modify our solar ordinances. When we established the solar ordinance about 18 months ago, we used the basis of the recommended ordinance from SolSmart and ICMA to make us a SolSmart community. That community was to encourage solar development.
All right, thank you.
Mayor.
Alderman McClanathan.
Beautifully covered, but just one quick observation. Looking at the map on it, and as you indicated, nothing else is developed along there. However, something were to be further developed, given its location in the back corner, was it the understanding that it would not be obtrusive, even if there was future developments? Let's say they're all filled in, the location of it would still be well suited in its area, given the corner of the property that's in.
Yeah, that was brought up at Planning Commission as to what if on a neighboring parcel, a home of some size, and in that neighborhood it would probably be another large home more than likely, were to obscure, the solar array and make it not as effective by blocking some sunlight. And, that was discussed at Planning Commission. I believe that's a risk that's understood by the developer and the property owner.
Okay.
Director Zupkoff, there were no objections from the ZBA, was there?
No objections from the ZB at the public hearing, no.
Any further discussion, council? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 13, which is the first reading of ordinance 2019-55. Could you please read this?
An ordinance granting a special use permit to allow a ground-mounted solar array in an R3 residential district at 2340 Marvin Lane in Freeport.
And Director Zupkoff.
Thank you, Your Honor. A lot of the same story here, same address, but it does require, of course, this special use permit to exist at all at any size. And we reviewed it as well to the city's special use standards, and those are: the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, and general welfare. Solar energy creates clean, renewable power from the sun and is known to have a favorable impact on the environment. The special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate area for the purpose already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood. Solar is environmentally friendly and does not provide any inherent visual or audible nuisances. In fact, once again, this proposed development is a low-profile system with a maximum height of only approximately 27 inches. The establishment of the special use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the adjacent property for uses permitted in the district. Given the exceptionally large size of this residential lot, again, it sits at 3.19 acres at its remote location at the end of an otherwise undeveloped cul-de-sac, plus considering that low-profile nature of the development and the presence of dense vegetation on the property, it's unlikely this solar array would impede development on neighboring lots. The LaSalle-Sinclair factors are the same as they were in the variance. I would just ask that you reconsider those in this instance and would ask for approval of this special use as well.
Your Honor, make a motion, move forward.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor made by Alderman Parker, seconded by Alderman Busker to move ordinance 2019-53 on, or I'm sorry, 55 onto the next regularly scheduled meeting. Is there any further discussion, council? All right, then we will move on to item number 14, which is the adoption of resolution 2019-48. Could you please read this?
Resolution of the City of Freeport setting the date and hours for trick-or-treating in the city for 2019.
Well, Manager Crowe, I'm sure there's lots of discussion on that one.
So this establishes trick-or-treating hours from 5 to 7 on the 31st, which is a Thursday of that week. And so this is standard ordinance that we've brought in. This will be the third year since I've been here we've brought this ordinance forward. Or resolution, excuse me, resolution. So.
Mayor,
Alderman Flanagan.
motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor made by Alderman McClanahan, seconded by Alderman Busker for the adoption of Resolution 2019-48. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Bordeman?
Aye.
McClanathan?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Parker?
Aye.
Busker?
Aye.
Misick?
Aye.
And Berberay.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 15 is the adoption of Resolution 2019-49. Could you please read this?
Resolution of the City of Freeport authorizing and approving a redevelopment and loan agreement between the City of Freeport and 218 Property Management, parentheses, Wagner House, and parentheses.
Thank you, Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, back in, you may be aware, since we have some council members that were not on the council, back in December of last year, we had approved a redevelopment agreement for Wagner House to redevelop for elevators, RDA, to purchase an elevator, to purchase, do some work for their ADA compliancy, and also a fire escape. They have, as they've gone through the state process, they've run into some issues dealing with job creation and financing of the project. At the recommendation of the state, as we go forward, they have withdrawn their request for that $300,000 under the DECO program, Department of Economic and Community Outreach. They have approached us to help them fund. They're putting down $185,000 and our additional $60,000 for the installation of an elevator. In the last year, they have lost 12 events due to the lack of having an automated elevator. Those events were weddings and events from outside the community that would have brought people into the community, stayed in our hotels, generated more revenue from hotel motels tax. Under this is a loan agreement that basically says that as they go forward, they will agree to stay in and keep Wagner House open for 5 years in operating, or they will have to pay back the $60,000 that will get forgiven at 20% per year. Additionally, you have loan guarantees from all three members of the LLC that will be signed by them, saying that they are responsible for it. You have the financials for the Wagner House. You also have the overall description of the project and the mortgage that covers this. This is Attorney Zito and I have worked these style of agreements in other communities, and this protects the city as we go forward. If they either, one, do not complete the project, they will receive the money once they again, give us the receipts for the project as they go forward. So that's how we ensure the project is completed. And then they have to stay in Wagner House for 5 years after that. So this is 60. When we say that's a forgivable loan, that's how it's set up. They make the installation of the project. We reimburse them once they give us the receipts for the installation. And then as they stay in, they get 20% forgiven every year as we go forward to this project. This is going to be funded out of the revolving loan money bond that we had taken. We feel that this is a good risk going forward because, number one, we reimburse after the completion of project number 2, they bring more business into the community, filling more hotel rooms, and they are a vital cornerstone to the Chicago area and future streetscaping, as well as the Chicago Business District. And I'm standing by for any question.
Manager Crowe, I appreciate those safeguards of having receipts and completions of the project. One question, do they have an expiration date of when they have to complete it by?
They have to complete this project, if I remember right, within 180 days of receipt, beginning of us signing the agreement.
Thank you. Questions, council?
Mayor,
Yes, Alderman McClathan.
as you had indicated, previously we'd been here in regards to that grant. From what I recall in that grant it was a grant that was going to be closed out, and there were specific parameters for applicants.
That's
and
correct.
They're one of the few entities that were eligible, or at the end of the day, arguably eligible when we submitted it, maybe even the only entity. And outside of using the funds on the grants, they said we could use it for public improvements.
And-
So on that grant, then we can use it at this stage since nobody else qualifies.
We're actually going to take that money back and use it to public infrastructure. One of them is the design and work that we have set up in the downtown area. We're actually going to take part of that money. We're allowed to have 2 different projects. The other one that we've been looking at is the replacement of the downtown sidewalks and making them, basically one of the areas that we have real problems with is Stevenson all the way down to down the full length down to South Street.
Follow up, Mayor? But so we couldn't have any other use for that money
No.
at this time, at this stage of the game.
If we had gone through this process and had gotten, part of the problem with this process, and I know Director Bucas and Director Zubkov have been very frustrated along with myself with the state. They have changed the guidelines under these projects throughout this whole process. What we found is if they had given us the guidelines and we had to have done these projects, we would have probably used infrastructure right from the very beginning. That they basically, at the end, that was what they finally told us. It says, this is really, we thought you were going to reinvest in the infrastructure project, so.
Additional follow-up, Mayor? Do we need to close out that portion before we're eligible for the other development, or was that something else that needed to be closed out?
Well, before we get any other DECO grants, we have to close out this revolving loan.
And on the merits then of this one, so this is substantially less of an investment from the city
That's correct.
in this new revised agreement. And if they don't comply with the parameters of it, 1, you don't pay them until the work is done. 2, it's forgiven over a 5-year basis. And so if they don't comply with keeping the business open over that period of time, they have to repay it. And you said you have guarantees also by the 3
We have
members on there?
personal guarantees that
Promissory
they've
notes.
signed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I think I heard most of that.
yeah.
Mayor?
Alderman Ross.
Okay, I can understand where the elevator is going to be very helpful for also their events and their the ADA. But what about the fire escape and the other ADA? Will they be in compliance?
They will not have the fire escape or the other ADA. The plan is to do that they want to come back and do that in another year at a later time.
Okay.
So this is strictly to address the elevator.
Yeah, Mayor. Yeah, to keep the ball rolling, but will they be in compliance since they don't have the fire escape or not?
Well, what the fire escape does is fire escape establishes the occupancy. What this done, that their upper floors right now are in temporary occupancies. This will allow them to get permanent occupancy on the 2nd and 3rd floor, but they won't be able to go to the full 400 until they get the 2nd fire escape done.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mayor,
Alderman McClathan.
the use of these funds is coming out of what we would bonded, so
That's correct.
it's pretty restricted in regards to what we can use them for. We can't, for instance, say, well, we want to put on some new stop signs over in Galena on it. These need to be used And this is in one of the areas that it could be used in, correct?
That's correct. Those funds have to be used in the downtown TIF area. They are restricted. The Wagner House falls within the downtown TIF. They are supposed to be used in some type of economic development. We viewed this because it increases the number of events that they can do, and which then in turn, the weddings, the majority of weddings they're having are weddings from outside the community, which increases. We have the hotel motel tax and other food and beverage tax that we get into the city.
One, I just also wanted to add just an additional piece of collateral that we were able to get from the developers, a mortgage on the property there, and I don't believe they have any existing mortgage on the property, so we're first lien position, so that's additional collateral.
Mayor,
Alderman Borneman.
just to clarify, Mr. Crow, this is the revolving, you say loan bond fund?
That's correct.
And this is the same loan that, or fund that was used to remedy or will be used to remedy the Ebet Books area?
That is incorrect. We have run into some concerns with Ebet Books, and we have some things that Ebet Books has not been able to complete the facade program grant that we gave them to meet the requirements, which is a much lower threshold. And so we've had an internal discussion with staff that until we can meet and guarantee, we're not going to bring that forward to council at this point. And additionally, Brian, the owners of Ebet Books, have some additional questions and things that we're still working on, and they had initially withdrawn that request.
Okay, just one more follow-up, or a few maybe. The elevator installation project at the Wagner House is right now, looks like it's $245,000.
Right, and they're providing $185,000 for it. We gave an additional contingency. They asked for an additional $5,000, $185,000, $245,000, so that's $60,000 covers that amount for the elevator, and that's including the electrical work, purchase of the elevator as it's going in.
And this loan fund is available for this type of work, economic development for any business in the downtown TIF area?
That's correct. Any business that wants to come into the downtown TIF or use, that there are two ways you can do the loan is use this revolving loan. One is as a gap financing for cover the first 25, up to the first 25% with the bank's loans. It can be used for this type of loan going forward, or there's also a micro loan that be run through the partnership as well.
Okay, and one last question. If you said it's forgivable over a 5-year term at 20% a year, if we were to go 4 years hypothetically and then the terms weren't met and it was defaulted on, would we recoup all $60,000 or just the 20%, or how would that work?
It would be the amount that's remaining. So in that case, that'd be $20,000, but it would be a mortgage. As we said, we're the holder of the first mortgage on the Wagner House.
Okay, and is there interest being accrued on this over time?
Well, it has a high interest rate that is accrued. Aaron, what was it, 6%? 11%. So what it does is that 11% is built up, but that's built up on the whole $60,000. So that throughout the time we forgive it, that interest rate's accrued, and then so if they back out, they still have to pay the 11% interest rate on the amount that they have gotten forgiven.
And then, so would it be fair to say that this is an investment that's good for the community that has very little risk for the city?
That's the way I view it.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Actually, clarification, sorry, it's 12%.
Keep them talking.
Yeah.
Mayor.
Yes, Alderman McClinton.
We don't have any other outstanding projects using the revolving loan fund at this time, correct?
We have no projects at this time.
And is it anticipated that while this is this has the dynamics of the forgivable, that there's probably moving forward, we anticipate a healthy blend between some of the microloans where we're going to have repayment to help replenish the fund.
That-
They're not going to be all forgivable loans.
And we've invested that fund into the local, and we actually have a percentage of interest that we've already gained on that. So we took this bond out approximately 18 months ago, and, we're waiting, the GFP's working on a couple projects that they have gone forward and processed that are new businesses, but they have not brought any of those forward yet to us.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion, council?
Madam Mayor,
Alderman,
based on the answers here, and as I've said, that this does seem to be an investment into our community that has positive potential with very little risk to the city. So based on that, I'm going to make a motion to adopt this resolution.
Second.
okay, we have a motion made by Alderman Borneman, seconded by Alderman Ross for the adoption of Resolution 2019-49. Unless there's any further discussion, Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Borneman,
Aye.
McClanathan,
Aye.
Ross,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Busker,
Aye.
Meissick,
Aye.
and Berberay.
Aye.
That resolution is adopted 7-0.
Item number 16 is adoption of Resolution 2019-50. Could you please read this?
Resolution of the City of Freeport committing to a 25% match from general funds of the city with regards to a pre-disaster mitigation grant.
Thank you. Assistant City Manager.
Thank you. So this resolution would approve the city's portion of the match for the pre-disaster mitigation grant for the buyout of properties east of the Pecatonica. This is required as part of the application for the PDM grant. The match is 25% of the total grant funds, and we expect that the match would be between about $1 million and $1.5 million. The maximum amount of funds awarded from the grant is $4 million. The match will be added to the budget next year, but we're still planning where the funds will come out of, and the funds will be spent over a 3-year period once it is issued. We currently have 126 properties that are signed up for the pre-disaster mitigation grant. This is increased by 11 since you were last updated about this last Friday. Director Zubkoff and myself went door to door to discuss the grant with residents that haven't signed up yet. And that's where we got the 11 extra people to sign up. There are still less than 30 occupied residential properties that haven't signed up for the grant, but we plan to go out again to speak with those people and try and catch them when they're home.
Mayor,
Alderman McClanathan.
with a 3-year period, then we can budget it out over 3 years in regards to payment of our match, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's the plan. Okay.
That's the plan. As we go forward, the issue is so after we receive the funds, the first property, we can start negotiations. So it'll probably be even 6 months after before we can get the first property purchased and torn down.
So we're looking at earliest the end of next year.
Right.
Mayor,
Alderman McClanathan.
I'll defer to Alderman Ross.
Alderman Ross.
No, I'd like to make a motion to go ahead with the approval of the bid.
I'd second that. I'd second the motion to adopt Resolution 2019-50.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Alderman Ross, seconded by Alderman McClanathan. Is there any further discussion, council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll in the adoption of Resolution 2019-50?
Borneman,
Aye.
McClanathan,
Aye.
Ross,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Busker,
Aye.
Meissick,
Aye.
and Berberay.
Aye.
Resolution 2019-50 is adopted 7-0.
Next, we have item number 17 is the opening bids for September 6th with the surplus. Director Carr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Back in August, we sent an ordinance through declaring quite a few items in surplus. So the bid opening for that, and none of the office supplies received bids. However, we did receive 2 bids, one from Growling and one from Maury, both for the sets of vehicles. So Maury ended up the low bidder on the 3 vans, and then Growling was the low bidder on the bus. So those 4 items looking, or I guess the high bidder, not low bidder, sorry. My apologies. Yeah, we'll go with the high one, I promise. That's what we've got. But staff request the approval of council to accept the high bids for the automobiles that totals out to $1,450.
Mayor,
Alderman Borneman.
just out of curiosity, what is going to be done with the items that weren't bid on? Does that they get sent to the state? Or?
So what happens is, we've actually approached several people about taking them off our hands, but we have to declare them in surplus before we can actually get rid of them. And we're actually looking at possible recycling them as well. They are not usable with our current systems. We've approached the school district, we've approached Aquin, we've approached the hospital, and nobody's interested in taking them off our hands.
Not even the very large hanging spring floral arrangement?
Not even that.
Would you like to?
Are you interested?
Take a look, maybe. But I would make a motion to approve the bids.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Alderman Borneman, seconded by Alderman Busker for the approval of the bids as stated. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Borneman.
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Misick.
Aye.
And Berberay.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, item number 18 is approval of bids for bid opening September 12th for the old City Hall wall renovation. Director Carr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This one's going to be a low bid, so we'll push that forward as opposed to last time. So the city had contracted out the design with Wilt Hoffman here in town. They've got a little more expertise in masonry masonry work than myself, and even what Fairgram has local. So they assembled the plans and they put it out for bid. The engineer's estimate on this project was $117,000. Low bidder was NICAM out of here in Freeport for $89,920. There were 3 bids at the time. So staff requests the approval from City Council to enter into a contract with NICAM to construct and repair the old City Hall wall for an amount of $89,920.
Madam Mayor.
Alderman Busker.
Motion to approve the bid.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of the bid by Alderman Busker, seconded by Alderman Parker. Discussion? Alderman McClanathan?
Mayor, thank you. So what's this going to generally look like? What are we doing on what building? I guess I'll start with that.
So this is the shared wall that was left after the old City Hall wall got tore down. So as you kind of travel Stevenson and you're on that wall in that area, that empty lot now that is dirt and grass covered, it's probably mud now. But that wall there with all the gaps and holes and peeled paint and all that kind of stuff. So they're gonna put in some flashing work, and they're gonna kind of straight line it across, except for at the joint of each building, because there's currently 2 buildings and then kind of a mid-low building that kind of sits. So at the joint of each of those buildings, there's going to be a small bump out to kind of prevent that from cracking. But in general, it's going to look very similar in color to is that Joe's Pizza?
Okay. Follow-up, Mayor. Have we had discussions with all the various owners of those, except the 2 buildings, the low building in the middle? Have we had discussions with them in regards to the plans, and is everybody comfortable both with the surface and the subsurface work that's the condition of these properties?
Yes.
Okay.
They actually met them with Will Hoffman out. The business owners met them and went top to bottom through all the buildings on both sides.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it.
They also, Will Hoffman used a new piece of it's almost like an X-raying equipment to go through, and well, it's a sonar or something. A piece of equipment where they could actually sound the wall, the conditions of the wall. It's the first time they've used it.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll on the approval of the bids.
Borneman,
Aye.
McLanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Meissick.
Aye.
And Berbere.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 19 is approval of the proposal for the repaving of the Newell lot. Director Carr?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is in front of you guys at the last council meeting. You guys asked for a little more information. So you've got both quotes in front of you. I even had Martin kind of reshape theirs so that way we can kind of compare it apples to apples with the per square yard item. So in general, this is the parking lot that is adjacent to the Newell parking lot. Sits between Stevenson and Exchange. And so it went out to bid. We received quotes both from Civil and Martin, though they both have very different square yardage estimates. Kind of going through it, Martin was the low bidder with the $12.42 per square yard. So looking at, I kind of did my own rough estimate out there is about 2,900 square yards of pavement. So the difference ends up being about $1,100 between the two bidders. So with that being said, the staff does request the approval from the City Council to enter into a contract with Martin and Company, out of Oregon to resurface the parking lot for $12.42 a square yard.
Thank you. Manager Crowe?
So the council's aware, you did receive a memo from Attorney Szymanski. What we did was we solicited bids for this. We did not go out through a formal bid process. Since we solicited bids, you are required, we can do that. We went out to builders, but it requires a 2/3 vote, just to make sure that council's aware of that to approve this, since this wasn't a straight bid process, but rather going out for the solicitation. Just want to make that aware as we go forward. She also had a discussion about, I know there was a discussion at the last one, considering how you go forward on the bids and selecting those bids.
Mayor. All right, thanks. I appreciate the documentation. Like I said at the last meeting, you kind of verbally walked us through most of it. I just appreciate being able to see, all those on it, especially when we solicited bids or solicited quotes rather than going for bids. So I appreciate the additional documentation. I was able to further, well, I won't say cement in my mind, but further clarify in my, just that, like you said, apples to apples on it. And so thank you.
Alderman Parker?
It may be in the memo, I haven't read it, that you said $12.42 a square yard.
Mhm.
That's what Martin's bid is. What is Sybil's?
$12.80.
$12.80. Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Alderman McLanathan?
Both of them did discuss the additional, what do they call it? Binder. So both of them would be charging additional for the binder amount, not just Martin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the cost that trying to think of how they worded it. So the way that Civil has it is right now they've got it kind of split up. They're saying they're going to put down a 1/2 inch of leveling binder and then 1.5 inches. But that's not necessarily going to take care of all of those issues. So we would have to be paying for an on-top price of that leveling binder for them as well.
And just as a note for the motion, when ultimately whichever alderman makes the motion, just as a belt and suspenders, if the motion could be phrased as a motion to waive the formal bidding process and award the contract to whichever contractor that the alderman wants to make the motion for.
What's your pleasure, council?
Mayor.
So moved.
All right.
Alderman Berbere?
Yes.
And Peter, were you the second?
Yeah, I was understanding, I assume that adopting the low quotes, or the low solicited quotes is what you were.
Yes.
Yep, I'll second that then.
Okay, unless there's any other Questions, council? We have a motion made by Alderman Burberry, seconded by Alderman Clanathan, to approve the proposed quotes.
Madam Mayor,
Alderman Meisick.
just looking at this, given that Newell decided to go with the higher bidder, now, and we'd be looking at having two contractors to complete this work then, correct?
So, one of the things you got to concern yourself with, so our contractor has to pay prevailing wage. So they may have, that may have caused the difference too. And Newell already had a pre-existing contract with Civil. So that was the reason why there would be two separate contractors. But as we go forward, but we always will make the recommendation with go with the low bidder or the low quote.
Follow up? So just to go through with this, like assuming we continue to go ahead with low bidder, the mechanics of how this would happen, a portion of the lot would be completed by one or not by the other?
They're two separate lots.
Oh, I see.
Yes, there's a
Okay.
there's a concrete sidewalk that runs in between them.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, we have a motion on the floor for this approval. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Borneman.
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker. Meisick.
Aye.
And Berberay.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 20 is the approval of the proposal from Thayer to switch the Freeport Art Museum to LED lighting. Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As council did lay this over from the last, to verify the quotes, we did verify that the quotes have not changed with Thayer. These are good, solid quotes for the installation of this. This will result in significant savings for us for both maintenance and electrical as we go forward. This is our last of our buildings we have to put to LED lighting, and will result in significant maintenance improvement as well as lighting cost for us. And also with the city will be, with the work that we've done with the street lights, we will be almost completely LED once this is completed.
Mayor,
Alderman McClanathan.
motion to approve the proposal from Thayer.
Second.
Any further discussion, council? We have a motion made by Alderman McClanathan, seconded by Alderman Borneman. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll on the approval from Thayer?
I'm sorry, Mayor, could you repeat the motion and second?
McClanathan and Borneman.
Thank you. Borneman.
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Meisick.
Aye.
And Berberay.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
And item number 21 is the approval of the vendor of the cloud-based SCADA system. Director Kopansky.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. At last week's Committee of the Whole, there was a presentation as to cloud-based SCADA. And a brief overview is what is SCADA, what have we had, what do we currently have, what are we looking to go to. And there was a presentation made. One of the action items that was presented was to go and take the quotes, put it in a tabular form to where the aldermen can review it. And basically what staff is requesting is approval to go with Metropolitan Industries to upgrade to a cloud-based SCADA system at a cost of $86,340.
Mayor.
Alderman McClanathan.
Thank you. You went over it pretty extensively last week with yourself and the representatives. The only thing I wanted to bring up from that was, while this was a professional services, so it's not formal bids, you did reach out to some of the other contemporaries that offer these services, and this one, this unit was substantially the most cost-effective for the city, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Alderman Meisick.
Yeah, and I did want to say thank you for the good discussion last week. on this topic, and I do see many, many benefits of the SCADA system, and particularly the discussions we had really highlight the improvements and really where we have opportunities to save even further dollars. So I'm excited for the implementation of this, really to serve our city much, much better. Thank you.
Would that be in the form of a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion made by Alderman Misick, seconded by Alderman Busker for the approval of the SCADA system. Is there any further discussion, council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Borneman.
Aye.
McClanathan.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Busker.
Aye.
Misick.
Aye.
And Berberay.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. On to department head reports. Finance.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you may recall, the Illinois General Assembly passed a increase in our gas tax and diesel fuel tax effective July 1st. We received our first payment this week of $38,000 from that tax. Basically, 54% of that tax is going towards local governments, of which 49% of the 54% goes to municipalities. Anyway, we get about 25% of the money. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Mayor,
Alderman McClanathan.
that payment was it for a quarter, for a month?
That was 1 month. That was for August.
Thank you. Director Zupkoff.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I was out with Ratio Friday night at Paint the Port. We were informing the public about the comprehensive planning process and completing surveys with them so that they can provide input into it. We completed approximately 50 surveys with various members of the public, which we thought was a good result.
Thank you. And Director Carr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. As many of you probably know, we're currently in a flood stage. So I wanted to at least give a heads up of some of the roads that are kind of currently underwater. So right now, underwater, we've got East Park, parts of Jackson, parts of Adelbert, parts of Orrin, parts of Wilbur, parts of Album, and parts of Sherman. All of those sit east of the Pectonica. We've got barricades up, kind of deferring that. We've even got, I guess, parts of Hancock closed. Hancock from Jackson to Stevenson is closed off as well. So we're detouring trucks down Hooker at this time. So appears that we have crested, at least for now. We're going to have a kind of a second wave coming, but right now the projections are kind of currently going to sit where we're at and kind of fluctuate within a couple inches. So besides the flooding, we also have quite a few construction projects that are supposed to be going on. Woodside's been kind of in a halt. The subcontract that was supposed to do the profile milling, the same ones that did the reclamation, are really busy right now. So Dunn will not be doing the profile milling. Instead, Civil has contracted out the profile milling with another company. They're going to be in here midweek, and they're going to start. They should be bringing the mill in today and tomorrow, and then they'll be starting to do some milling there on Wednesday. And then as soon as that's done, we're going to do a little bit of surface prep, and then the surface will probably go on next week. So Woodside is probably a week and a half to 2 weeks from being completed. The Peck Path project that we're using the ITEP funds, they've done some center line staking, and they're ready to do some tree removal. But when the flood waters came up, that's kind of put them on a halt. The old Cherokee, which was supposed to start what feels like a millennia ago, still has not started. They're planning to begin the milling and manhole adjustments on Thursday of this week. The contractor did confirm to me, or did reaffirm to me, that they believe they'll be able to finish in 10 or so days. So starting Thursday, you give them 2 weeks, and they should be able to complete.
The roads are?
Even though I called the bid the Old Cherokee, they're actually in the Countryside Estates, but it is Wild Oats Trail, Country Place, Wheatland, and Farmdale.
Mayor,
Alderman McClanathan.
thank you for the update on that last one. remind me, when was the kind of like the drop dead date that they had pursuant to our contract?
It is the end of October.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor. Yes, I see that we have our new excavator.
Yeah, it's running out at the wastewater treatment plant right now. We're trying to.
Have we, do we have any use yet or not? Is it being used yet?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's actually filling a hole right now for that solar development that's going in.
Good deal.
We've used it to pull out some trees and some leveling out at by the fire station over off of Adams.
Good deal. Nice piece of equipment. It's going to serve the city well.
Alderman Borneman.
With regards to Woodside, you said it's 1 to 2 weeks from being completed. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Does it make it behind schedule at all due to the delays, or no?
The rain really hasn't helped a whole lot, but the delays on the contractor that got real busy has been kind of what has held that up.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to Fire Chief.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The only thing I have to report this week is to highlight our Aid to Firefighters grant program that we received for the department for radios and an extractor washer. We are working on forming a committee, a responder-based committee, to specify and select the radio that we will use. And the committee has started to work on a 13-point implementation plan. We will be working with some critical partners like the dispatch center, our law enforcement partners that supervise that to facilitate the implementation plan. And we're hoping to be completed with that project by April of 2020. The project, we do have a performance period to complete the grant by September 9th of next year, so we should be able to complete that within the time limit. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And Police Chief.
The two new officers that were sworn in last week started the police academy in Champaign this morning. So before you know it, they'll be back here and hitting the streets of Freeport. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome back and congratulate Deputy Chief Summers, who graduated last week from the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. So well done, man.
Yes, congratulations. Director Kopansky.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. As far as updates, Float Street, the very first phase, all the infrastructure is in the ground. The other remaining items on that first phase is parkway restoration, putting down the asphalt, getting that back to where it's roadworthy like how it has been before. Second phase, the contractor is staging the materials and equipment over there. So they are starting on it. And then one last thing to tie in with the rain events we've had over the last week. We've had approximately 7 inches of rain at the Hancock plant. One thing with it is that the Hancock plant is a site where we download information provided to the federal government as far as rain, temperature, humidity, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor.
Alderman Ross.
Yes, Director. How are we coming with the arcade and their lead lines being done?
We have not yet received the grant from the state to commence the
start to work on it.
We've started receiving some of the documents. We've gotten some of the documents on the loans and grants today. So when we get that money from the state, that's when we receive that.
Follow up, Mayor. So more than likely, we're looking at next spring to get the ball rolling, possibly on that.
So right now we're waiting on the IEPA for that process. Whether or not they fund that project is going to be completely based on what their structure is for at-risk projects and stuff like that.
Okay.
That's the same thing that we're kind of going through with the wastewater treatment plant in Cleveland and all those. So as those kind of keep getting held up a little bit, I mean, the lead lines are also going to be pushed back the same.
Push back a little bit too. Okay, thank you though.
Okay. We will move on to IT. Kurt, did you have something? Nope. And library. Ashley.
Good evening, and as my new tradition, I'm going to tell you what a non-resident card is at the library. So because it's National Library Card Sign-Up Month, there are ways for you to get a library card even if you don't live within the city limits of Freeport. And based on Illinois state law, if you do not live within the city limit and you are not paying property taxes into the library, then you will be, we have a special formula that we use to calculate the amount for you to purchase a library card for 1 year. And for non-residents outside the city of Freeport, but close to the city of Freeport, it is $92, which seems like a lot, but it is based off of how much a property owner within the city of Freeport is already paying. So as to not give non-residents an unfair advantage in access to the services, we do an equatable charge for that service. Any questions?
What's the rate if you're not close?
It's based on where you live in your closest library. So if you're really close to the city of Freeport, then you must come here to get your library card. And then there's other places, like they can go to Foreston if they live closer to Foreston.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
And Assistant to the City Manager, did you have something? Nope. And we'll move on to City Manager.
She took charge and she put this together with the help of Director Zubkov and Assistant City Manager Kirsten Hines. So there were other members of the city staff, including the library director, out there helping. So we had representatives from the city, the county, University of Illinois Extension, MetLife, the NROTC unit, Noon Kiwanis, and I will tell you, I recognize both Jack Carey from the Park District, Chairman Hadley was out there as well, carrying stuff. So Freeport Recycling Center and Kevin Mooring, Pete Albert from Protocutter, who drove both of them drove forklifts for us, TriStar Metals, Ann's Landscape, Terry Marsh, and the Sheriff's Reserve. We were able to get 409 vehicles processed through to filling 4 semis. Unfortunately, they had to shut it off at 11:15 because the IEPA only authorized us 4 semis. And once we had the 4 semis filled, we had to shut people off. We had to turn away close to 300 cars. So we're trying to work up to get another event done this year. More to follow on that. We did, in front of each one of the council members is the zoning map that was requested that is going to be brought in front of the Planning Commission. They're going to have a public hearing on the 10th of October dealing with what our zoning should be for adult cannabis locations so they can bring a proposal forward that'll be before the Planning Commission meeting. And so that kind of gives you what the zoning map looks like. And this has been working from Eric from down the Deputy IT Director. As we talked about a little bit earlier, solar panels installation, the flooding's and rain has kind of slowed things up here. We were hoping to have the solar panels going in earlier this week. We are just now being able to smooth out the ground for it. Tentatively, it's scheduled to start installation on Thursday. Maybe sometime next week, depending on how the rain comes out and how the ground does. But that will provide 65% of the energy for the wastewater treatment facility, and that, along with the LED, is some of our move towards being a more green city. So as we move forward. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Do you have a time on that public hearing for the 10th?
It will be.
Go ahead.
It'll just be a part of the regularly scheduled planning commission meeting, which begins at 5:30 here in council chambers.
Okay, thank you. So just to piggyback on the weekend's events, I'd just like to thank all of the many, many volunteers for Paint the Port and Brew Fest. You know, it's a great whole weekend event that draws in lots of tourism, great family events, and, you know, it's a great way for people to rekindle some old friendships as well as make new ones. And just to remind everyone to put on their calendars for the end of the month, the 27th and 28th, is a new event called Eats and Beats, which will have lots of live music and food, and it will all to be for the benefit of 20 non-profits in the city of Freeport. And that is held downtown as well. And the gate admission is only $3. So avail yourself to that. And on to new council business would be Alderman Borneman.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman McClanathan?
Nothing further.
Alderman Ross?
Yes, we have a Third Ward Neighborhood March meeting this Thursday at 6 p.m. at the VFW in the arcade.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Parker?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Alderman Busker?
Just a reminder of the Fifth Ward Neighborhood Watch meeting tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock at First Church of the Nazarene at Carrollton Empire.
Thank you. Alderman Misek?
Also a reminder, 7th Ward Neighborhood Watch is Wednesday, September 25th, beginning at 6:30. I will not be in attendance in this meeting. Also had asked for an alternate, and the alternate is also not available. But please do attend for regular updates. I will be at the next meeting in October.
Thank you. Alderman Berberet?
Compliments to the assistant to the city manager for a fine article in the paper this weekend about the pre-disaster mitigation process. It's very, very informative. Thank you.
We will move on to item number 26, which is public comment. Tommy?
Chief, want to ask you about they find her at the. Yeah. And I heard Matt says she's in Stephen County Jail.
I'm sorry, Tommy.
Matt said she's at Stephen County Jail.
Might still be down in Will County.
Hey, Matt.
I love that.
Oh, she's here, she said.
Okay.
And Joey Moe, what's this about?
She's locked up, Tommy.
What's this is about? Something over Oasis down.
Yes, there is a new owner for that building, and they are doing some cosmetic changes and opening soon.
Where's it gonna be? What's the name?
It'll be a restaurant. I don't know the name.
Oh, you don't know the name? Okay.
Thank you, Tommy. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 27, which is executive session. Madam Clerk, could you please read this?
Pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C2, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C11, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the findings shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting.
Thank you. Is there a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion made by Alderman Busker, seconded by Alderman Misek. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Borneman?
Aye.
McClanathan?
Aye.
Ross?
Aye.
Parker?
Aye.
Busker?
Aye.
Misek?
Aye.
And Berberet.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.